What's up, guys? It's me, Lumos Theromax, and today we're here to talk about actually one of the major people inside the entire YouTube sphere of comic book related people, that being Comicstorian. You see, he recently put out a video essentially claiming that all legacy heroes suck and are bad. And so I'm gonna give my own opinions on that, which I just want to say, I'm gonna preface everything from here on out, like, no hate towards Comicstorian or anything like that. He's actually one of the guys I used to watch way back in the day of just really cool stories I had never really seen before to see if they were worth the investment in whenever it came to like a buying or like reading a comic. So big shout outs to him, but I'm here to give you my take on his opinion that all legacy heroes are bad. So be sure to like and subscribe down low, and let's get to it. So the main premise that he really offers is that like all legacy heroes suck and are bad. And that's something that, like, I'll admit, there is like a kernel of truth to that. Well, what is a legacy character? Well, a legacy character is somebody who takes up like the name of someone else. I don't know if I necessarily 100% agree with that. Honestly, I'll take it a lot further. I don't even know if I 50% agree with that to a certain extent, because he specifies he's talking about both Marvel and DC within the confines of this specific video. And so I think that there are things that you can draw. He says in general, and I'll admit, like, as a very, 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 very broad net, I could agree to a certain extent for sure, but definitely not in all situations. Given I'm pretty biased, and you can tell what I've got going on around me, that I think that DC actually handles legacy heroes far better than Marvel does. Because Marvel, a lot of times whenever they have somebody step up into like the mantle of like a character or like a name, like, take for example The Flash. Okay, so there's a lot of different Flashes out there, and one of his critiques are like, hey yo, these heroes step up into the role like Jane Foster, they're here for a year and then they're just kind of woo, you know, they're kind of whatever at that point in time. And that's true, but if you look at like DC, and like 90% of his references were, I'm not even kidding, Marvel characters outside of Nightwing becoming Batman, which, I mean, he does kind of step into the role of Batman, but at the same time, I mean, he has his own title outside of Batman, that being Nightwing. Whenever people think of the Flash, the first person they think of is Barry Allen. Well, guess what? Barry Allen is a legacy character. Jay Garrick was before him. So legacy characters themselves are something that have been like iconic within like the idea of DC in general. Whereas I feel like in Marvel, we get a lot more of that utilized in a much weaker sense. Like somebody will step up to be Captain America and they get that title for like a month or not a month, like a year, like a whole storyline essentially. And it's not very long. Or like Captain America Sam Wilson, which went on for a little while, long enough for the main character to just kind of come back. But if you look at stuff like the Flashes, which Jay Garrick gives up the role to Flash inadvertently, or to Barry Allen. Barry Allen dies in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and he gives up that mantle, and Wally West takes it. He holds that mantle for like over 10 years. I want to say it's almost 20 years. He is the Flash. I think it's like 87 through like 2004 or some like really absurd time frame. I think whenever he's positioning a lot of his arguments against the idea of legacy heroes and stepping up into that role, it shouldn't just be a cheap cash grab for that character to quote unquote die, like he said, somebody else to take up the role and then just be forgotten about the next arc over. I agree with that, but you think, well, maybe you're just being selective, Lumos, within the context of DC. It's just the Flashes, right? Well, it's like, well, no, it's not just them on top of that. You also have characters like, take your pick of any Green Lantern, okay? The title Green Lantern is something that anybody can essentially have as long as they don one of those rings. And it does get confusing as to who is the quote-unquote Green Lantern, which is one of his prominent arguments. It's like, whenever I pick up a comic that says Green Lantern on top, I want to know who it is. Well, it's like, that's true, but you should look. Like, I think that's more so on you than it is anybody else. It does get confusing whenever you're talking about a character in whichever moment in time. There are multiple characters who hold these really powerful like roles or titles or mantles that kind of exist out there. But I don't think it's too much of a stretch to, you know, claim that there are a variety of people all with the same name, but visually you should be able to identify these characters as separate. And a lot of times they even mention each other within the context of the comic. So let's just break down like the Green Lanterns, for example. Well, pretty much every single major Green Lantern you can think of is a legacy character. Every single one of them outside of Alan Scott, the OG. And Hal Jordan's a legacy character as a result of that. Jon Stewart's a legacy character as a result of that. I mean, Guy Gardner as well as Kyle Rayner, they're all legacy characters. I don't think they're suck, and I don't even think they're bad. And a lot of these characters even had that same role or mantle while Hal Jordan was still alive, let alone whenever he died later on. And Kyle still upheld that mantle for over 10 years. I want to say it's literally 15 years. About enough 14 years, because 91 to, I think it's 2000, right at the end of 2004, 2005's Green Lantern Rebirth. Like, I just think that saying as a blanket statement across all legacy characters suck and are bad, I disagree with that 100% as a result of us having, more specifically on the side of DC, really strong legacy characters that can move on and develop and become arguably at times superior to the original, like Wally West, for example. Whenever, I mean, even in the current day, I can't even say this is like just during his 90s run where he did manage to outperform everything Wally West had ever done. He comes back and does it towards like Flash War, where he just blatantly outruns Barry. It takes all the powers he really needs to just break the Speed Force within the context of that story. But then later on, proves it even further within the context of everything going on after he gets unmoored, and can utilize it in a variety of ways that Barry Allen never really could. I think that writing them all off because, and I will agree here, in the current day, does it feel a little bit more cash grabby to kill a character off, have somebody else step into that role for a year and meme out? Like, I get that. We shouldn't be doing that. But to blanket statement everyone in as that, I feel like is kind of a bad portrayal of some of the greatest legacy characters there are. I mean, heck, I guess I can't say most, a large chunk of the league's most notable characters are indeed legacy heroes. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But giving into one granular idea of like, they're all bad seems kind of like down bad. Like, I wouldn't agree with that. I wish Marvel had a better representation in that field like DC does. Like, one or two genuinely solid characters can be like, yo, that's a legacy character, and they have lived up to that mantle in an unbelievable way. And albeit I think she's pretty mid, I think Captain Marvel, which you even referenced in your video, if you're watching this, Comicstorian, I think Captain Marvel, like, I think she's kind of mid, but she's lived up to that role of Captain Marvel. She's out here, she's doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and she's like wildin', right? At least she has like a very large extended period of being within the role of Captain Marvel. So I can find at least some legacy characters who've been around as arguably icons in the modern era that are legacy characters. Now, I agree Jane Foster was an amazing story, was written absolutely well, but they did kind of yoink her from the spotlight, unfortunately a little too soon, so that one did feel a little bit cash grabby as a result. But if you do consider her a legacy character, and her legacy does live on in Valkyrie, I would agree that that's not necessarily as strong of one, considering they changed her name. They just removed her as being a quote-unquote Thor and changed her into a Valkyrie, given she's still in that same crowd of people. Now, when it comes to like Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and the issues of like a bunch of different people, like Green Lantern, all having like the same title, Spider-Man or Green Lantern, it can get confusing. Like, I'm not sugarcoating that. It can get confusing that all these different characters and all these different people all hold the same name, but as a fan, you should be reaching out, and you should be the one who is looking to those things, looking at the context clues, which should be very obvious. I mean, in terms of like what the characters are, or if somebody's talking about a version of a character, I don't think it's absurd to go out of your way to ask, well, what's his name? His non-Spider-Man name. Like, fans, whenever they talk about a character, whenever they say Spider-Man, just like you said, when people just say Spider-Man, they think, oh, Peter Parker. But when people traditionally talk about characters like, oh, Miles Morales Spider-Man, like they even prefix his name ahead of it. But if you're confused going to a store and not being sure which character is in the comic book that you are buying, I don't understand how you could look at the cover and not know which character that is, considering how dynamic some of their outfits are. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, Miles Morales, his outfit is dramatically different than the outfit of Peter Parker. Like, that's just super straightforward. I don't even think you can really argue that. I mean, it's entirely black with red outlines versus the classic red and blue with some black highlights that Peter Parker's wears, or like the 9,000 other versions of Spider-Man as clones, etc., etc. I think that having a pantheon of characters is definitely a way for a corporation to sell the name or the brand of a character in a variety of ways to benefit off of it monetarily. I understand that, but sometimes it can be done well. I mean, look at the Flashes, look at the Green Lanterns, and even look at some of the Bat family. I mean, we got like 9,000 Robins. It can get confusing, but it's also your duty as a fan to specify which characters you genuinely enjoy. Like, in the Lantern mythos, look at these guys, bro. I got lanterns everywhere. No, like 95% of the base fucking hates Guy Gardner, okay? But you know what? The Guy Gardner fans are gonna come up, they're gonna tell you I like Green Lantern and it's Guy Gardner. You can look at that as confusing and bad, but I just look at that as that mantle, that role has got a variety of characters who all can represent it, and they can represent it simultaneously and effectively. But having different people do that isn't even a bad thing. Like, I think it can actually be a strength whenever it comes to characters all wielding the mantle being like this name or title you need to live up to, and each character representing a certain facet of that mantle that you should live up to. Like in a variety of ways. Like Spider-Man right now, Peter Parker's the more mature version of what Spider-Man should be, and Miles Morales is still the younger, like goofier, I'm making like really high school level mistakes despite everything going on, even though I'm a superhero kind of thing. Just like in like with the Lanterns, for example, you have like Hal Jordan out here being the embodiment of will. You have like Guy Gardner being the hothead who doesn't listen to the rules whatsoever. You have John being the cold, calm, collected, like thought out representation of will, choosing the right moments to attack. And you have like Kyle Rayner being the imaginative side of that, taking anything he could imagine and forcing it into reality via his thoughts. I think all those things feed into that mantle, and just having more than one person represent it isn't a bad thing. Is it confusing? Yeah. But you know what? I'd rather have some level of confusion than limit the amount of characters in verse because there is a title that a bunch of characters are all vying for, and they don't want to acknowledge all those characters because for some reason there's a belief that only one person can do that. When, why negotiate? It's like going in and saying, hey, we only sell one kind of chicken here. It's this one. And it's like, okay, but like, why not have multiple types of chicken? You can have grilled chicken, you can have fried chicken, you have boiled chicken. I mean, you can do whatever you want, right? I think having all those different types of that thing are a positive rather than a negative. Now, can it be done bad? Oh yeah, for sure. Can it be cash grabby? Yeah. But just because it can be those things doesn't mean all of them are in every situation. But that's just my opinion. Why don't you guys tell me what you think down low Was Comicstorian right? Did you guys like my opinion on this? And I told y'all I was going to be doing more of this vlog style stuff for a little while. So, I don't know. Tell me what you think of both this video and theirs, and let's see what's up. Tell me what you think. That being said, next time, Lanterns. Later.